Hey buds, Socialism Done Left here. I'm going to be reviewing and critiquing the video Enforcement of LGBT on Society, Makinations 8 from Islamic Pulse, which is more or less just any other standard old conservative channel, which is hating on gays and trans, and it doesn't particularly have like a very Islamic feel as far as I can tell, which I think is exemplified by the pinned comment. I'm an Orthodox Christian and I heartily agree with you. We need to fight the demoralization of our youth. So this isn't like an Islam thing, it's just a conservative suck thing. With that, I'll give it a start.
The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was once asked, when will Al-Qa'im return, the Mahdi, Imam al-Mahdi, when will he come back? To which the Holy Prophet said, when the men will resemble women and the women will resemble men. Men will suffice with men and women will suffice with women.
See, this is actually based. Have you guys ever heard about the evangelical Christians who want to put all the Jews back in Israel because the Bible says that once all the Jews are back in Israel, that's when the end times are going to happen? I think that it's important that Muslims be gay and trans positive so that they can bring around the end times. The sooner it is that men fuck men, that men look like women, the prophet's coming back. Hell yeah, baby. If you aren't gay positive, you're not a real Muslim. Sorry, I don't make the rules.
Now more than ever before, we can see that society has moved in this direction dramatically. Last episode, we introduced the Yogyakarta principles, but how are these dogmatic ideas of the sexual revolution being implemented into the foundations of society? My name is Mudaffar Haider, and this is The Makinations.
I love the fear party. This is fucking hilarious. Oh my god. Look, it's based because I'm speaking the truth. Okay? If you can't handle it, I don't need you here.
In a somewhat alarming and chilling exposition, psychologist and behaviorist Bernays reveals that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society.
He's quoting Edward Bernays, who was important in creating modern advertisement. He had experience with propaganda in World War I, and he brought that into private sector advertising. And he argued actually that propaganda is a good thing. He's actually kind of somewhat a complicated figure. Generally, I find that people who start out their videos by quoting Bernays want you to believe a sort of conspiratorial mindset that the controllers of society are inseminating their ideas into the masses and that you don't have any control because they're telling you what to think and what to feel. And also, hypocritically, I would say they tend to be very, very uncritical of certain sources. For example, they cite a 1,100-year-old holy book that has little to no supporting evidence for any of its claims.
To manipulate the unseen mechanism of our society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country.
Damn, what did I say? Conspiratorial thinking.
We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of.
So, bringing this up, totally fine. Our opinions are shaped by people outside of our control. If you're just bringing this up to scaremonger that the LGBT agenda is being forced onto people, it's stupid as shit. You actually have to prove that. You can't just quote Bernays.
Mr. Zainab Thani presenting today.
Oh, sorry. He's going to do a little segment with the female co-host. Or, I guess, like, she/her co-host.
Men we have never heard of. Sister Zainab Thani presenting today how they have managed to do this.
To implement the Yogyakarta principles into the bedrock of society and into the minds of its citizens, various overt and covert methods are used, including hollowing out national sovereignty through treaty monitoring bodies and NGOs, securing...
I hate this idea. The very existence of international bodies, for some definition of sovereignty, which is like total control, yes, it's undermining it, but the only people who tend to defend this absolute idea of sovereignty seem to have no ability to like explain how that would ensure that all people have their basic rights protected. Like, what you'll often see is that the same people will defend intervention. If you want, like they'll say, oh, that country was a dictatorship. Oh, that country was like socialist. It was oppressing its people. If you genuinely believe that human rights are universal, if you genuinely believe that like Islam is universal, then you would want an international body that has some ability to standardize protections for all people. You don't want to just leave each area up to its own thing. It's the same principle as federalism in the United States. We don't leave each county up to decide what their laws are. We don't leave each state to decide what their laws are. We give them some autonomy, but you need some degree of of control from the top, with everyone participating to ensure that everyone gets some basic rights met. Or at least that's the theory, that's the ideal. In practice, obviously, it's much more complicated, and often those big governments can screw you down at the bottom. But just merely having international intervention and then pretending that your sovereignty has been destroyed because the UN is out there, and every 10 years they publish something and it's like, hey guys, the gays are really being oppressed. It would be great if you stop doing that. We have no power to enforce that. Come on, man. That's just railing against invisible enemies because you have nothing concrete to campaign on. Holy shit. Yeah, NGO is bad. I know one of the things that Viktor Orban in Hungary did that was very successful, and that Trump does too, is they will constantly rail about the elites and the foreign powers that are trying to take control of our society. There's these NGOs destroying our sovereignty. It's a really easy thing to complain about, but it's a very much harder thing to prove that the existence of a gay international group is meaningfully destroying your ability to self-govern.
Financial resources in the millions from the UN, EU.
In the millions. Can you imagine ever saying that oh my god, society is being destroyed? Someone just got $1 million. Do you understand how little money that is in terms of oh my god?
And individual states for LGBTI organisations, litigating court test cases at all levels in the name of human rights, changing a population's fundamental values through demonstrations, media influence, implementation of the LGBTI agenda in the school system, and training the bureaucracy. They employ programs of
So I just want to be clear, right? They started with Bernays. They told you it's a conspiracy. They're just telling you all the things in that conspiracy. They aren't explicitly saying that's all part of a conspiracy by the UN or the globalists or whatever, but they're just very heavily implying it. It's the same thing. Destiny talks about this a lot. If any of you have a term for it, I would love to hear it, where they give you a descriptive claim, a descriptive claim, a descriptive claim, a descriptive claim. The elites are in this big conspiracy to control public opinion. The elites are pushing LGBT stuff on us. The elites are destroying national sovereignty. The elites are forcing LGBT agendas on the youth. What prescriptive claim arises from that? Clearly you should be opposed to them. Clearly you should be fighting the elites. Often they won't say it. Basically it's descriptive. They'll never say the prescriptive. I think it's very shitty. Let's see if they actually do say the prescriptive. Jack Max says, I'm here just to listen to feds. Okay. VGL Cat says, lol, Amazon did a PGR campaign. Gay agenda confirmed. True. The gay agenda is when the gay agenda is when people can see that gay people exist in media. As soon as you see one person on Amazon PR, that's when gayness wins.
Training and awareness raising to change the belief that humanity depends on sex between a man and a woman, and that same-sex relations are normal. In particular,
one of the things, what they just mentioned is such an old anti-gay trope that it's crazy to me. I went when I was in college to a Ahmadiyya Muslim conference about society and stuff and politics. And they raised the same objection too, that don't you know that if people didn't breed, society would collapse? And it's such a misunderstanding of what gay rights is, or what homosexuality is. The goal isn't that everyone should be homosexual. It's that homosexuals should be homosexual. The rest of society, the 95%, they can keep on breeding as much as they want. There's no real risk that part is that society is going to collapse because a few people stopped fucking. And if it were, then you would be against people who chose to go into celibacy, right? Clearly, this is not the actual concern. It's just a fear mongering thing.
they're targeting police, judges, prison staff, employers, social workers, teachers and students. All occupations must thus promote the YP agenda, or they are seen as violating human rights.
Based. I'm Muslim and LGBT, and I teach children it's okay to be both. One of the coolest things to see, it's slow, and it's frustrating, and it's not going fast enough, is that Muslims in Europe slowly but surely are moving to the left. They slowly but surely are liberalizing. And worldwide, Muslims are liberalizing like every other religion. As incomes rise, as education rises, as democracy rises, people gain freedoms, and they use those freedoms to more fully express themselves. They use those freedoms to move away from illiberal ideas of democracy, illiberal ideas of traditions, and they become more self-expressive of their sexuality and of other identities. Yeah, no, this is basic shit. I'm so glad about this.
Social and legal sanctions against opposition. So this includes curtailment of freedom of contract.
This is such a weird like freedom reduction of theirs, but I'll let them go again. One moment.
So this includes curtailment of freedom of contract. You cannot refuse employment or refuse to rent a home to someone who is an active LGBT member, including a cross-dresser.
Over 200 cities have laws in place protecting LGBT communities from employment discrimination. However, some of these laws do not always apply for private employers or businesses with less than 15 employees, and most religious organizations are also exempt. That still leaves over half the country without laws specifically prohibiting discrimination against LGBT employees or customers. And in many states, it's still legal to discriminate against the LGBT community when it comes to housing, public accommodations, adoption, and hospital visitations. So the answer is yes. In the majority of the United States, it is legal to discriminate against LGBT individuals. However, there are people working to change this. President Obama issued an executive order to protect LGBT federal employees from discrimination in July of 2014. And in 2013, the Senate passed the Employment Non-Discrimination Act Protection Bill for the first time ever. But the bill has since stalled in the House and will most likely never pass. Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley is also proposing a new bill that will prevent LGBT discrimination in employment, housing, jury service, public accommodations, and more. And many advocates are optimistic of change, pointing at the rising number of states that have legalized gay marriage, as well as the American public's growing support of gay rights. According to a Human Rights Campaign poll, over 70% of likely voters would be in favor of a federal law banning LGBT discrimination. And 87% of Americans already think there is one.
So the evidence of curtailment of freedom of contract is that you can't do discrimination. True, you can't discriminate against certain sets of like protected groups. The funny thing is that usually it's like libertarians that bring this up, unless they want to argue that like under Muslim jurisprudence there is no valid reason for you to like prevent people from doing discrimination, say based on race, for example. It seems very odd that they would just call it curtailment of freedom of contract. What they're really saying is that they want to be able to fire LGBT people. It's not like a general freedom of contract thing. It's a very specific thing. They want to discriminate against LGBT people, and to do so, to make any sort of like valid argument, you generally need to say, oh, there's a good reason to discriminate. Generally in the United States, we say it's like something related to like your ability to do your job. So for example, you can discriminate based on like how strong someone is. You can discriminate based on how intelligent someone is, because those might be relevant to the job. But you aren't allowed to discriminate based on things which have like social stigma attached to them, usually, are pretty immutable, usually, and things which aren't relevant to the job. That's why it's stuff like race, that's why it's stuff like gender, that's why it's stuff like sexuality. In most of the cases, it just doesn't matter. So if they want to explain otherwise, that's on them. Titan 208 says, yeah, socialism is cool, but when are we getting our League of Legends streams? This Supreme Court could be very bad for gay rights. Gaying can disrupt the workplace. That's true, right? I've often found myself, right, like, oh, I'm just having another work day, and then boom, I find myself under the desk.
Liberal. I love you.
Just doing unspeakable workplace destroying things. It's just so sad that gays keep doing this, keep destroying workplaces. All right, let's continue listening to Sister.
And 87% of Americans already think there is one.
Curtailment of freedom of speech. The LGBT freedom of speech is exempt from general views of public order and morals, whilst
they're saying our freedom of speech is being restricted. And then in the very next sentence, they're suggesting that LGBT speech should be restricted to public senses of moral, order and morals, right? Like, what if not is that a restriction of freedom of speech?
The rest of the population's freedom of speech must not hurt the feelings of the LGBTI community. Suppression.
So on this one, I think that this is like such a... So for me, freedom of speech obviously can have like an expansive or restrictive sort of definition. Restrictive is like when the government doesn't restrict you from speaking. Expansive is like your ability to express yourself. And in the expansive definition, employers firing you, people like censoring you in like private press, all sorts of things can reduce your freedom of speech. They're using the expansive definition here that like, hey, when you face social stigma for expressing certain views, your freedom of speech has been curtailed. But generally, we don't consider this to be a bad thing for certain types of views. Generally, when people are bigoted based based on race, when people are bigoted based on sex, we generally think it's okay to provide social stigma towards them because those views are unacceptable. This radical idea that every idea should not face any social stigma, which is the natural consequence if you believe that facing social stigma is like a bad thing and a restriction of freedom of speech, is just absurd. For one, you can never achieve it. You can never eliminate like people hating on views they dislike. And two, more clearly, there's no reason why you would want that. If you want freedom of speech, then it should be okay to provide stigma towards people who express certain views. If you want to have expansive freedom of speech, one of the consequences of expansive freedom of speech is that other people need to be able to apply expansive freedom of speech to you. Now, there are some arguments that there can be chilling effects. That, like, hey, especially for like minority communities, if there is like a whole lot of harassment and discrimination against the minority community, then their speech is chilled. The idea is that people in that community are less free to speak because they are afraid of speaking up. They are afraid of the harassment that will come out of it. So this is a reasonable fear, I think, in some cases. However, when you're talking about politically active issues like this, it's just really not the case. You're not talking about people who are like afraid to speak up. There clearly are many conservatives in the United States who are not afraid to speak up about this. And if they aren't speaking up about it now, it's probably because it's extremely unpopular and they don't want to popularize their opinions on it. When they're like running for office, you can still find plenty of hosts who oppose to gay marriage, like Ben Shapiro. I think he might be in favor of civil unions, but I don't actually recall that. It might be someone else I'm thinking of. Long and short of it is that I think that this very expensive idea of freedom of speech, which has like, you even build in an idea of like, if you want to build in the idea of like chilling effects, then you get to this really complicated notion of freedom of speech, which goes far beyond what this video is willing to grapple with. Then you have to say, hey, we do think that it would be better if there was less cancel culture, if people were less likely to get upset at like homophobic views. But in response, we will also do a whole lot less stigma towards gay people. We will not pretend that gay people are part of some conspiracy that controls the world and is putting the gay agenda to force all of your children to become drag queens or whatever. There's a tit for tat if you want to argue for that definition of freedom of speech, which they clearly are not. I'm gaying up the workplace. Oh God, I'm gaying. Fuck Ben Shapiro. Fuck Femme Shapiro. That's right. We need Femme Shapiro. We need a more beautiful society. Let him play.
Speech must not hurt the feelings of the LGBTI community. Suppression of non-compliant information. So LGBTI lobbies consider research into the cause, a treatment of homosexuality as discrimination, and it attempts to suppress it. They also block those who want to receive this treatment.
Wake up,
Interest.
I love you.
One of the things that's really interesting about this one is that the science is just so overwhelmingly against conversion therapy that they have to call it out as like a sort of a freedom issue rather than like a medical issue. If I came up to you and I said, hey, there's a medical procedure which has never been proven to work in a valid, randomly controlled study, which thousands of people will say caused them severe psychological trauma, which in lower quality studies works only at best 25% of the time, and even then we don't know for how long it will work. And all of these things are true of the existing literature on conversion therapy, you would probably be okay with saying, hey, maybe it'd be okay to put restrictions on that, were there to be a case where lots of parents were sending their children by force to camps that would apply this treatment by force to children. I don't think it's that hard to say that when there are untreated and provably or reasonably harmful medical treatments, you can put limitations on them. And that's the example of like conversion therapy. If you want to read more, let me go get, it would be maybe X is 3. Oops. X is 3. Nope, not that one. There is an APA report on conversion therapy, which found, quote, our analysis of the methodology of sexual orientation change efforts reveals substantial deficiencies. Due to these limitations, the recent empirical literature provides little basis for concluding whether SOCE has any effect on sexual orientation. They also note the limited number of rigorous early studies and complete lack of rigorous recent prospective research on SOCE limits claims for the efficacy and safety of SOCE. Within the early group of studies, there are a small number of rigorous studies of SOCE, and those focus on the use of aversive treatments, which means stuff like shock therapy and like hitting people and various things like that. These studies show that enduring change to an individual's sexual orientation is uncommon, and that a very small minority of people in these studies showed any credible evidence of reduced same-sex sexual attraction, though some showed lessened physiological arousal to all sexual stimuli, which is not a good outcome. In short, the evidence in favor of SOCE is so incredibly bad that like a very credible risk from thousands of people who have come out of these camps and like claimed that they've been abused, claimed that they've like faced intense psychological trauma. I think I even have a study in here that people who report having been in these camps have like 2 to 3 times higher suicide rates. When you have these claims, I don't think it's that unreasonable to ban these sort of things. This is just an unjustified medical procedure. Absolutely. Titan asked me about the NAP. Maybe another time. You can ask me tomorrow during the AMA. Hexolio says, what document is this? This is the stinky right-winger fact sheet text format. You can get the HTML format. I can actually have a command for that. SRF.
Wake up, liberal.
And there's a text format. Here. Read the full statement. Okay, is this going to be a meme? Titan, thoughts on the NAP. Earlier today, when I was driving, I was considered the bad guy because I did a hit and run when a 7-year-old went out to the middle of the street and violated the non-aggression principle of my right head lane. I knew I had nothing to answer for, so I went off into the sunset on another day in Ancapistan. Thoughts on how I should proceed with a potential unsolicited state-mandated force if it's pursued against me? This stream is strictly TOS compliant, and so I encourage you to cooperate with all LEOs. I do agree, though, that that baby really was asking for it. All right, gonna click play.
Groups use intimidation, defamation, campaigns against therapists, speakers they dislike, and undesirable conferences to suppress any information about the possibility of altering.
Suppression, right? They're talking about suppression of gay conversion therapy. Their example, I think this is Australia, I might be wrong. News, gay conversion therapy survivals share painful legacy of ex-gay treatments. But how can someone speaking freedom of speech be suppressing you? They were just arguing that like the LGBT were suppressing your freedom of speech just by speaking at you. Like what? It's such a weird. The basic answer is they just don't want LGBT people to speak up. But whatever.
LGBTI orientation and behaviour. The criminalisation of the opposition, for example, hate speech, hate crime, sexual radicals have extremely fluid and expansive definitions of concepts such as...
They're complaining that hate speech and hate crime are 2 broad definitions. On screen, they show a BBC article titled, and I kid you not, Tanzania says anti-gay squads are not government policy. God, they're calling anything hate crimes today. When me and the buds go out in our anti-gay squad and go kill some LGBT people, they'll say that's a hate crime. Come on, dude, can't you do anything nowadays?
Sexual radicals have extremely fluid and expansive definitions of concepts such as crime, including anything that amounts to be an offensive act to a perceived offensive and subjective feeling. So even expressing the truth itself, Baskerville argues, provides no excuse for offending a sexual ideologue. The Supreme Court of Canada openly asserts that truthful statements can be presented in a manner that would meet the definition of hate speech.
This is one of those things where if they were a serious channel, they would show you the ruling, they would explain it in context, because what they said there is that truthful statements can be presented in such a way as to constitute hate speech. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with 1350. Merely stating that blacks make up 13% of the population and do 50% of the crime is a true-ish statement. It's more like 1338 or so, right? That's the true statement. presenting that on its own is true, but also presenting it on its own and refusing to provide context, consistently harping on it as like a racialized element of black people, basically providing decontextualized facts certainly can be hate speech. This is like assuming that what the ruling is actually talking about is what I'm talking about. This is such a narrow interpretation of what truth means. Clearly, when we're searching for truth, we're not just searching for, oh, I said something that was technically true. We're searching for something which is like holistically true, that someone made a genuine effort to speak the truth about an issue. So that's really frustrating that they would quote it as such. A pink wug has been pinged with a note that the 7-year-old was aggressing against my car going down the street. That's right, pink wug. I know that your comics are usually about cute things like worker exploitation and rising up against Amazon, but when are you going to make a comic about the NAP and why Austrian economics should include more empirical-based analysis?
Hate speech laws are more totalitarian than hate crimes, as they seek to criminalize free speech itself, unless you're LGBTI, of course. There exists no clear-cut definition of hate speech, and hence anything the ideologues claim to be offended by can be prosecuted as hate speech.
They're just picking such bad examples of images to show that it's like it's distracting me from what she's saying. So some of these are probably maybe like bordering on hate groups, like FAIR and Jihad Watch and Tea Party Nation. Those are like borderline things. VDARE is openly white supremacist. They're openly white nationalists. They want to return. The reason that they're called VDARE is the first white person born on American soil was Virginia Dare. The Nation of Islam is on here. I'm pretty sure they're also like openly anti-Semitic. They're just picking such bad examples. Holy shit. The Westboro Baptist Church, the American Nazi Party. Yeah, these are good examples of hate groups. Good point.
It provides an extremely convenient and effective means of silencing any differing views and shutting down the debate. The only purpose of this law is to criminalize political opposition.
And of course, we have to look at the implementation of the LGBT agenda into the school system. The right to education demands that states shall ensure that education methods, curricula, and resources serve to enhance understanding of and respect for inter alia diverse sexual orientations and gender identities, including the particular needs of students, their parents, and family members related to these grounds. Now,
wait. This is one of those things. So one, I have no idea what the Yagya Carta principles are. Maybe I'll need to do a review on Makinations 7 or whatever. Apparently they discussed it in there. Maybe it's like some big, spooky, scary, like UN Agenda 21 thing where the UN's coming in and they're controlling all our schools. They can control the children. Seems unlikely. The UN has basically no power. If you know anything about American school independence, you'll know that like Texan schools for a long time, like and southern school districts for a long time had textbooks which called like the War of Northern Aggression. Right, the Civil War was the War of Northern Aggression. You have like tons of stuff like that. So that's like a total conspiracy theory. But even on the merits, let's say like the conspiracy theory is totally right. States shall ensure education methods serve to enhance understanding of and respect for diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. One of the things that frustrates me so much is this statement alone says nothing that should be offensive to anyone. Even conservatives should say, yes, I respect gay people. I think that they are valuable human beings, but I think that what they're doing is causing harm to society, and ideally we should like try to help them change their behavior. If the solution was about rehabilitation, if conservatives were like genuinely rehabilitative, compassionate individuals, I would say, and compassionate as a political movement, their goal would be something like providing free like conversion therapy, if it actually worked, of course, but they'd push it anyway, I guess, regardless. Their solutions would have to be stuff like helping with abstinence programs. It would have to be stuff about like sexual education for homosexuals to like help them do as little as possible. You could even argue that like one of the things that some people dislike about homosexuality was that back in the 70s and 80s, people were very promiscuous statistically because it was harder for them to get stable partners because their existence was illegalized and highly stigmatized. And so literally something that people proposed is like, hey, they should get into marriages, have regular partners, and they'll have Christian-like, they'll have like heterosexual-like relations. It just bothers me so much. This is a bit like the abortion thing. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree about like the morality of abortion, the conservative solutions are just so interested in retribution, in attacking the gays, attacking the women, and not interested in solving the underlying problem. If you think that it is an underlying problem, which I don't think homosexuality is. Anyway, let's look at chat. The agenda. Full femboy outfit. It's not a dog collar. And I am actually, all right, chat, I need your opinions on this. I would say at this point that I'm basically like agender. I've always not cared much about gender, but now explicitly I just want to tie a label to it so that I can get like I can't say that. I want to tie a label to it so that I can more constructively form my identity in these LGBTQ diverse spaces. No, agender is better because non-binary implies that I care about gender, and I really, really don't. You just want to say NB gang because everyone's being NB because that's what's cool. Okay, I'm a hipster. Y'all are the fucking like K-pop stans. You see someone who looks good, you see someone who's famous. That's me. I'm NB. Me? I'm agender. I don't even know what gender is. I'm agender before it was cool. That's right. Potato Buan says agender seems good for you. That's right. Speaking the truth. If there was a data-driven gender, you'd be that. True.
Of students, their parents and family members related to these grounds. Now, this asserts that school curricula and the training of caregivers and teachers must be focused on changing the mindset of children and teenagers so they perceive any form of non-heterosexual behavior as normal. Which brings us to the EU and the new gender
They're just doing all the usual scaremongering about drag queens. I'm not even going to mention on it. It's been so overdone.
person. The EU has developed into a power machine that enables influential lobbyists to establish the new gender person as the norm at the European level and penalise any opposition. It provides favoured NGOs with privileged access for pushing their agenda.
Look, while I would like to set the new gender person as the femboy, as the norm, I would love, without end, a society where men and women alike, we all aspire to be Astolfo. That would be a fucking dream. That is not what is happening. You fucking kidding me? We exist in a society where trans people are like barely getting to recognition and non-discrimination status, and this man is talking like, oh my god, they want everyone to be fucking transgender drag queens. God damn it. We don't even have a federal, like, we still don't even have a federal gay marriage law, right? The only thing that's protecting that is the Supreme Court. We still don't have fucking federal non-discrimination in, like, housing, education, healthcare, etc. God damn. These lobbyists don't do fucking shit in the United States. Maybe over in the EU they got laws like this, but it's just so fucking insane.
Wielding influence. The LGBT organisation ILGA receives 70% of its funding from the EU taxes. Human rights are exploited for creating a new
This is one of those things where I don't know enough about Europe to and like it's not NGO sector to actually understand this. It could be the kind of thing where the European government just gives out a bunch of money to advocacy groups in pursuit of something that's called pluralism, where you have a whole bunch of lobbying groups that try to organize coalitions and gain political power, because then you have more like participatory democracy. Which is like a really good step, to be clear. It could be that like if I look and I can find like 5 or 6 Muslim advocacy groups, which also get like a ton of funding from Europe, right? Because they want to include people in the process. It could also be that that doesn't exist. I have no fucking idea. Mentioning one group, mentioning like that the EU gives it money is just worthless without context.
Image of human gender, and those rights are constantly being reformulated, expanded, and manipulatively interpreted. The European Court of Human Rights has the right to govern.
Guys, I'm about to expand my right to not face discrimination in housing. God damn it. God damn it.
And family and marriage laws for national states. It does not connect men or women in a relationship with family and marriage. It sees the two as unrelated. This consequently opens up the door to the legal implementation of homosexual marriage. A toolbox to enforce the global LGBT agenda was approved in 2010 by the Working Party on Human Rights and called the Toolkit to promote and protect the enjoyment
why are they
of
showing
all
us
human
navigating
rights
to
by
it?
LGBT.
I think their editor just got really lazy for this bit and just like opened up OBS and is like, oh, I'm just gonna go get through the PDF. I'm sorry, I have to listen to what they're saying.
This consequently opens up the door to the legal implementation of homosexual marriage. A toolbox to enforce the global LGBT agenda was approved in 2010 by the Working Party on Human Rights and called the Toolkit to promote and protect the enjoyment of all human rights by LGBT people. It aims to react to cases where the violation of human rights of LGBT has occurred. The promotion and protection of such rights is the goal of EU foreign policy, for which finances are made available. The tool.
Like at this point, I don't know what to say. If true, that's probably a good thing. It is a good thing that democracies see injustice anywhere as a threat to justice everywhere. We would live in a better world when countries that are like strong in terms of their moral values, in terms of like tolerance and so on, helped make other countries more tolerant. I'm totally in favor of like what they're talking about here is not even like, it's not like sanctions or anything even close to hard, right? It's literally just going to be the EU saying, hey Turkey, it'd be really great if you had some gay non-discrimination laws, and just doing like the sort of a whiny naggy stuff that the UN does. I don't know. I don't know what there is to say about this. It's just like, if true, based. If not, they should be doing it. The music is spooky because the whole goal of this is just to spook people rather than to educate. If you're familiar with Black Pigeon Speaks, he does the exact same thing.
Toolkit is to be constantly updated to further the LGBT agenda and the implementation of gender mainstreaming. All countries wanting to join the EU have to accept gender mainstreaming. TANDIS, the Tolerance and Non-Discrimination Information System, was established to take over the anti-LGBT discrimination agenda. TANDIS is the coordinating point for the worldwide networking of LGBT activists and provides them with the necessary information. It annually reports on hate crimes. For an act to qualify as a hate crime, hate does not need to be proven as a motive, but as a bias. In other words, anything can be referred to as a hate crime. Even this video can be referred to as a hate crime, even...
I don't know that I refer to it as a hate crime so much as like an intelligence crime, because I think it's assaulting my fucking brain. Holy shit. Yes, they're trying to say that homosexuality shouldn't be accepted. This is like a traditional conservative, like Muslim channel. Sockton left. If you're identifying as agender, what do you want your pronouns? I don't care. I don't care how I dress. I don't care how I present. I don't care how people call me. It's just meaningless to me. This is just your standard whinging, like, oh my god, the hate crime legislation is too broad, without actually pointing to any examples of it being too broad, or even like proof that it's too broad in a systemic way. Examples is like the lowest bar, but I guarantee they aren't going to look at it because they haven't looked at it for the past 9 minutes.
Even though all we're doing is providing research. Just as the Zionist...
My man's is like going into like searching for a single PDF on like the EU Commission website and like loading it up in OCR. Ah, yes, research. They were complaining earlier about like conversion therapy bans. Ah, yes, research. My man, if you just research into this, like even half skeptically, holy shit.
This regime can label anyone as an anti-Semite for criticizing the apartheid state of Israel. So too can the LGBT community call out anything as a hate crime if they disagree with it.
No homos will ever be allowed on this church as long as I'm the pastor here. Never!
Those hateful words.
There's an account called Women Posting Their L's on Twitter, because some people just really like to post examples where they fucking, like, they just totally lost. They just got utterly destroyed. That was an example of that. Holy shit. Post an example of your guy freaking out because he doesn't want gays in his church, as if there's like some disgusting gay energy they're going to emanate. That is an example of an L. Why would you include that in your video? Anyone who thinks this projects like masculine energy or like the ideal of what you want the conservative movement to look like is just dumb as shit.
So too can the LGBT community call out anything as a hate crime if they disagree with it.
No homos will ever be allowed on this church as long as I'm the pastor here. Never!
Those hateful...
Wake up, Libra. I love you.
Added the term Muslims fucking. Well, I'm glad I did that. Number of times interviewer repeats hate crimes. What? Comparisons to violent... All right, let's just watch.
Words are from the mouth of a Tempe pastor preaching that God's word says that killing gay people is the only way to get rid of AIDS by Christmas. Pastor Steven Anderson has agreed to join us tonight for an exclusive one-on-one interview. Pastor Anderson, thanks for...
The way this was introduced, we'll see if it's true. The way this was introduced, this guy says that he wants to kill gays. Why can't they pick examples of hate crime legislation going too far that aren't fucking insane? This guy is nuts.
For coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
Have you always hated gay people? Is it something your father taught you, or is it something that you came to on your own?
No, I haven't always. You know, I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't until I read the Bible cover to cover at age 17 that I discovered the truth of what the Bible really says, because a lot of passages don't ever get preached from the pulpit because they're simply not popular.
I have to be honest, when I heard your sermon, it sounded like the rantings of someone who was either a hate monger or a religious zealot, and I'm wondering, which are you?
Well, I'm a religious zealot, and, you know, I love the
these
Bible,
questions?
I love
This
God's
interview
Word,
is
I
shit.
believe that the law of the Lord is perfect, and, you know, Leviticus 20:13 clearly says, if a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with the woman, both of them have committed an abomination, they shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. And, you know, as a Christian, I believe the Bible, and that's where I get my belief.
Imagine ever complaining about indoctrination when your belief system is based on a book that's been taught to you once per week, every week since you've been born. Holy shit.
Doesn't the Ten Commandment, isn't the first commandment, thou shalt not kill?
No, the first commandment is thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Okay,
But, of course...
Is thou shalt not kill one of the commandments?
Yes, it is. But what you have to understand is that the Bible commands that certain people be put to death, not by me, not by Christians. It's obviously not my job or the job of any Christian to go out and kill anybody, and I've never taught anything like that. But rather that the government's job is to punish criminals and to execute.
It's not any Christian's job to do it. I just think that everyone should be Christians, and that the government, who is then composed of Christians, should go out and kill gay people. What a fucking stupid line of logic.
Those who've committed capital crimes. And according to the Bible, homosexuality is a capital crime, and I didn't write the Bible.
What if irony of ironies, it turned out that you had a gay son or a gay daughter? Would you want them dead as a way to cure AIDS?
Well, that's just a fallacy that it just turns out that certain people are gay. That's just a lie, because it's not random. It's not something that's just going to accidentally happen to one of my children.
Wait, how do you think it happens then?
Why did they pick this example? Is this whole channel like a psyop to show how stupid conservatives are? I don't even need to debunk this. Just listen to this man.
Well, the Bible's real clear how it happens in Romans chapter 1. It talks about how God gives people over to a reprobate mind to do these filthy acts.
As long as you bring up Adolf Hitler, he wanted to exterminate Jews and anyone who wasn't blonde hair and blue-eyed, who didn't fit into his vision of the way people should be. Isn't that, in a way, what you're preaching, that you want to get rid of anyone who isn't heterosexual?
Absolutely not. I'm preaching the Bible, something that Adolf Hitler rejected. He taught evolution, which is why he wanted to execute what he considered.
This is your daily reminder that 30% of the United States believes in creationism, believes that the Bible is infallible, and does not believe in evolution. Which party do they vote for?
to be inferior races.
But
I don't believe
you would like to
races.
see anyone who's not heterosexual die, correct?
Well, the Bible says that
I'm asking what you believe.
I believe the Bible. I believe what the Bible says. And if I didn't, then I wouldn't be a Baptist. I wouldn't be a Christian if I didn't believe the Bible.
It sounds like, because you won't answer what you believe, that you're
I did answer what I believe.
I believe hiding behind the Bible.
Hold on a second. I believe what the Bible says, that homosexuals should be executed. Let me make myself clear. I believe that, and I've never gone back on that for 1 second. So every Christian believes the Bible, or else they're not even really a Christian.
If you believe that, anyone who is not heterosexual should die, correct?
Absolutely, of course. That's what the Bible...
Hello, folks. I'd like to present you an example of a hate speech legislation going too far. 1, reminder that there is no hate speech legislation in the United States, so it is literally impossible that it went too far in this example. 2, I'd like to show you an example of a guy literally calling for gays to be killed. Do you really think that we should be calling this hate speech? God damn.
Bible says.
You hate gay people.
Yes.
I'm Jewish. How do you feel about Jews?
Oh, I don't hate Jews. I mean, that's just a straw man to try to compare me to Hitler. I don't hate Jews whatsoever.
Blacks? Do you hate black people? Because you
of
said
course
you
not. My church is filled with black people.
Did you say, Pastor, that you prayed for the death of Barack Obama?
Oh, so now Obama and the race card comes out. My church is filled with black people. My church is filled with all races. In fact, the Bible says we're all of one blood.
Am I misquoting you? Or did you say that you pray for the death of Barack Obama?
Well, yes, I did, but Obama's white. Obama's not black anyway. He's half white and half black, so just as well as you can call him black, I'll call him white. He's a white man.
Some would say that just as the Taliban and the ISIS fighters have perverted Islam and made it violent to fit their vision of the world, that's what you're doing, is you're perverting Christianity to fit your vision of the world.
Well, let the viewer read for themselves. Let them pull the Bible off their shelf and look up Leviticus 20:13, and then let them be the judge. Intelligent people will listen to the entire sermon, aids the judgment of God, and will pull their Bible off their shelf and read Leviticus 20:13.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but did you say that if people perceive you as a hate monger or your church as a hate group, so be it?
Absolutely. I don't care how people perceive me.
Hate speech laws have gone too far. Now they're literally applying to people who describe themselves as hate speech committers.
They called Jesus Beelzebub. They nailed him to the cross. And Jesus said that they hated him because he testified of their works, that their works were evil. That's what I'm doing. That's why they hate me.
Stay tuned for more, inshallah.
Why would they end with that? How could you compose this video and think that this would convince people that homosexuality is wrong, or that like we should this has to be, this channel has to be like a fake. There is no way that this is a real channel. Like, okay, I will admit I watched I think like a few minutes of some of their other videos, like this one, which is glorifying the Iranian scientist who was killed by Israel. They seem so sincere. How could they possibly do such a terrible job? Holy shit. Inshallah, brethren. Look at the ratio. This is true of every conservative channel. One of the things that you'll see on conservative Twitter is that every conservative will like a few like very high up conservative posts, and there will be this enormous long tail of conservative accounts that just get no engagement whatsoever. Same thing is true here. Conservatives always like the video. It's liberals that refuse to like the video, that refuse to engage in the parasocial relationship. That's right. I'm speaking to you for refusing to click that follow button. You're a liberal. If you want to be a leftist, you click the follow button. Leftists slam the follow button. I sound like I'm trying not to wake my parents up because I am trying not to wake my parents up. They're asleep and I don't want to wake them up, and the walls are pretty thin. So with that, I think that we've basically covered this video, which I did not expect to be so funny. I expected it to be like, and in verse X of the Quran, we see something preached, and we see someone who is liberal saying that we should do the opposite, and then I'd have to make an actual argument. But the vast majority of what they said was either disproved by what they said on screen, just hilariously like incorrect on its own face, like that hate speech has gone too far, showing an example of like someone who is clearly doing like what the intention of hate speech would be to cover, or just factually incorrect, like the conversion therapy stuff. Like it was so easy. Holy shit.